last week. Over 40,000 primary school students collected their PSLE results. It was an emotional ride for them and their parents. And for some, even more so because of this.
In this episode, I'm on a mission to find out if our PSLE mathematics paper is as tough as people make it out to be. Hi Ian.
Hi Steve.
Nice to meet you.
I'm meeting 12-year-old Ian, one of the thousands of students who sat for the PSLE exam.
Of all the subjects you've taken, which is the one you're feeling most nervous about?
Well, math, because the difficulty level was slightly higher than expected.
Okay, so you felt the pressure when you were doing that exam, the math exam.
Yes.
Can you remember how you felt before you took the math exam?
I've been doing quite well for math, so I wasn't that nervous because I've prepared a lot already.
So you were actually quite confident going into the exam?
Yes.
And as you were taking the exam, how did you feel?
In the beginning of the paper, it was as per normal. However, as we progressed onto the end, the last, may I say, 3 to 4 questions, it was a higher difficulty than what I was expecting.
And could you solve it?
The second last question, the difficulty was higher than what I expected, and I wasn't really able.
When the teacher said, time's up, pens down, what was your reaction?
My first reaction was I put my pen down, I put the paper on the side, and I started taking deep breaths. I tried to calm myself down. I could still feel my heart thumping. I felt slightly dejected because I wasn't able to solve that question.
Back in October, the PSLE Maths Paper 2, which has more complex problems, made headlines. Students in tears. Parents calling it exceptionally difficult. One mother took to the Education Minister's Facebook page, calling the maths exam harrowing and so devastating. She didn't understand why it was made so unreasonably tough, such that children came out crying, deflated, demoralized, and crushed. This is not the first time parents have taken issue with the PSLE Maths paper.
In 1988, then Member of Parliament S. Chandradas brought up how difficult the
Maths paper was. He said parents and teachers complain about the maths paper, which they thought were to test the gifted pupils.
And the complaint centered around one question, which many parents and MPs, including Mr. Chandradas, couldn't solve. In 2005, there was an uproar over a flaw in one of the questions, where it was mathematically impossible to draw this diagram. In 2015, parents were upset over this question. It asked, how heavy are 8 $1 Singapore coins? They felt it wasn't related to mathematics. And in 2017, there was this question. Jess needs 200 ribbons. They are each 110 cm long. And the ribbons are sold in rolls of 25 meters each. What is the least number of ribbon rolls Jess needs to buy? It had everyone, including me, stumped.
So is our PSLE Maths paper really too tough? To find out, I'm gathering some of Singapore's brightest, and no, they're not students. Sim Boon, an ethical computer hacker who won this year's Cyber Investigators Challenge and was runner-up to an Asia-Pacific hackathon. And Barry Tan, ENT surgeon, present scholar, plus he scored an A-star for his own PSLE Maths exam back in 1987. I've put together PSLE Maths questions from previous years that drew the most flack from parents.
So typically students are given 2.5 hours to complete the PSLE Mathematics Paper 2 because it has the most complex questions. But today we've only got 5 questions for these guys here, so I'm going to give them just 30 minutes. And they get to use their calculators too. Okay, and your time starts now. feeling right now?
Challenged. A lot of considerations to be made.
How are you doing?
Okay, this is new to me, all this modeling method.
I'm glad I'm not taking the test. Just 1 minute left. 10 seconds. And time's up. Pens down. So, how did you find the paper?
Very challenging.
Yeah?
Yeah, especially the last question. I'm amazed that the primary sixes will be expected to come up with a technique or at least understand how to answer a question. It completely baffled me. I was stumped. And even with the benefit of a calculator, you know, I wouldn't know what to key into the calculator to magically unravel that question.
Can you imagine a 12-year-old facing these same questions?
I was already gulping. I was just thinking to myself, wow, if the kids encounter this early on in the paper too, and it shakes their confidence, how are they going to handle the other questions?
How do you think you've done?
I don't think all are correct.
Okay.
I like the last question especially.
Oh, you like the last one?
I like
Why?
the last question because the first thing I see is a pattern, and that's what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Okay, I will take these and get them marked. Kind of correct. Okay guys, I've done the marking. Here are your papers. Barry, you got 4 out of 5 correct.
Thanks. I can tell my kids that it's time for ice cream celebration.
Chabun, 3 out of 5. What do you think?
There's room for improvement.
But the last one, which was the most complicated one, you got it correct.
Yeah.
Why do you think you got the last question correct and the most difficult one?
But I do have to look at things from a different angle. Think out of the box.
Okay.
And usually when you think out of the box, one of the first things you see is to spot patterns. And spotting patterns is something that I do in order to find issues with websites.
What you're saying is actually your life experiences help you understand and answer this question, right? Not something you had learned in school.
Yeah.
So, even some of our brightest minds are stumped by PSLE maths questions. But they haven't been in school for some time. So the real question is, have our kids been prepared for these tough questions in school? Parents are upset about this year's PSLE maths questions. I wanted to know if it was an overreaction.
What is 90%?
9 by 10.
9 by 10. Good.
Yeah.
Giri Vedha has had a lot of experience with PSLE maths questions. He tutored his son for the exam in 2015 and is now doing the same for his youngest son who will sit for the exam next year. He found this year's questions, especially this, more difficult than previous years.
So why do you think this year there's been so much unhappiness and outrage over the PSLE mathematics exam?
It was too tough, especially the part C. Part A and B was still okay. Part C was tough in many aspects. I think the parents are a little bit sad because of the fact that very extremely tough questions have come in, which are, I would say, beyond the curriculum. Also, the kids are getting disappointed and they have further tests to attend. So they come home crying, then what can the parents do?
But is this something the kids would have learned in school?
Definitely not. Because this particular series is actually secondary 1 syllabus.
Oh.
Yes, so these kids would not have been exposed to solving this kind of problem unless they go for Olympiad class or they are a GP, more exposure.
So you're saying that question actually would be something kids in secondary 1 would learn?
Yes, not in a normal primary school, not taught in the class.
So they would need to get tuition?
Either tuition, and even then I really doubt, even if the kid has been going for tuition, this particular is even beyond the ones that will start in a tuition class.
Wow.
Yes.
But do you think that is fair? To have these questions?
It's actually not fair. If it is taught in the classroom, then it is fair.
No sooner than when the furor over the tough PSLE maths questions went viral online, this popped up on my social media newsfeed. Various tuition centres were seen posting the solutions to the infamous tough questions. Some even said they go the extra mile in compiling these questions and brainstorm all possible solutions. I wonder if tough PSLE maths questions is what's driving parents to tuition centres.
There are, of course, a ton of tuition centres, but this one caught my eye because it's literally called PSLE Math. So I want to contact them to find out more.
Jason Hyak is the founder. He started PSLE Math 10 years ago. And as I'm about to find out, Jason's centre starts prepping its students for PSLE Maths much earlier than I thought.
Our centre taking kids from preschool to primary 6.
From preschool
Yeah.
all the way to primary
Yes,
6,
correct.
they are all preparing just for the PSLE exam.
Just prepare for the single goal.
Wow.
PSLE math exams.
So how does your centre prepare the kids to take these tough PSLE questions?
I'm going to show you an example of a simple number bond concept that was taught in preschool and how this same concept slowly evolved into complicated questions that are potentially tested in PSLE exams. This is an example of a number bond question.
This is for the preschool kids?
Yes, for a preschool kid. And you can see it's pretty simple. So as a child goes to primary school, number bonds will be replaced with model question. Now, look, this is similar to that question, but now you can see that the same concept, the school has now introduced the element of fraction into the question. Let me show you a typical PSLE kind of math question. You can see that it's very similar to the previous example, but this time the main difference is that it introduced multiple fractions and require the child to understand the concept of remaining plus values.
So it helps if they start younger, right? I guess then does that mean a kid who comes in at primary 3 and 4 will have less of an advantage?
Yeah, obviously if you start at preschool, you have an advantage.
The kids that come for tuition, do they stand a better chance of acing the PSLE mathematics exam with those tough questions?
Yes, it certainly will help children who come for tuition to do better in PSLE exams.
So I found out that 10 weeks of classes here cost between $400 to $500. And I do admit sending any kid at preschool age does seem a bit extreme. But it really is a question of demand and supply.
If we keep hearing about how difficult the PSLE math paper is, then I can see why parents would want to ensure that their children are prepared. And such tuition centres will continue to exist to cater to those fearsome maths papers. In a way, as our mathematics becomes more focused on critical thinking, tuition centres too have to adapt to feed that demand. And that could also be a reason why Singapore is doing so much better in mathematics compared to its counterparts.
A lot of countries, they teach many topics, but they just touch on the surface, just skimming.
Hello, can I have some egg tarts, please? Thank you. Well, I'm not really here today to eat these egg tarts. In fact, I'm here to try and solve a mathematics problem. So Jamie and Oliver used $61.20 each to buy some egg tarts. Jamie bought 6 more egg tarts than Oliver and has a 15% discount. So, how many egg tarts did Jamie buy and how much is one egg tart?
I don't know how to solve this, but the average 12-year-old Singaporean kid should be able to answer this question. And that's how good our kids are in mathematics.
And just in case you're wondering, Jamie had to buy 40 egg tarts and they cost $1.80 each.
Typically, children in other countries, for example the UK and USA, start key examinations by the time they turn 14 years old. But in Singapore, parents are preparing children for the PSLE when they are in primary 4. Overall, the sentiment is that Singapore mathematics is tougher than what is taught in different countries. This could be the reason for this. The Programme for International Student Assessment, or PISA, has been dubbed the World Cup for Education. It tests critical thinking in math, science and reading in 15-year-olds in some 70 countries. The latest PISA saw Singapore rank number 1 in all subjects, with Singapore beating Hong Kong and Macau in mathematics. Melina Tan wrote a blog post in 2018. In it, she lists down the reasons that Singaporean students top the PISA tests. One of them is the PSLE exams.
So Melina, tell me, why do you think our PSLE math papers are the reason why Singapore kids do well in the PISA test?
The PSLE paper tests them on critical thinking, especially for maths. So PISA tests children on critical thinking as well. For example, this is a PISA sample.
Okay.
So basically, they give you 2 dice. They tell you that the total number of dots on 2 opposite faces is always 7. So it's a special kind of dice. Then they'll ask the child, fold it so that you have this situation. So it's not really calculation, right? It's not really doing ratios. It's about visualizing something. It's a visual skill. So this is an example of critical thinking. They actually start learning this from P3 onwards. So by the time they do the PISA test, right, that's exactly what they test them on. They are actually trained to do it.
So how much more difficult then is Singapore math compared to the rest of the world?
All over the world, children learn traditional maths, which is calculating, measuring, looking at pie charts, bar graphs, recognizing shapes. So it's very direct. Now, Singapore maths is different because it challenges your mind to think harder and in greater depth.
Do these sort of tough questions groom our kids to do well in all these other tests and things like PISA?
Yes, definitely. Even my kids, they go overseas, for uni or pre-U, and they often have to sit for IQ tests. And they do very well. I'm very certain that it's because of this kind. They've been trained, their mind has been trained.
But Singapore mathematics wasn't always ahead of other countries. In fact, from 1965 to 1979, many of the primary and secondary textbooks used in Singapore were imported from other nations. It was only in 1982 that Singapore published its own maths program. Throughout the years, the program was revised several times, each time with less focus on memorization and greater emphasis on conceptual and strategic thinking. Eventually, Singapore students started to outrank other countries in the subject, and other countries started to take notice and adapt Singapore maths in their own curriculum from Southeast Asia to the United States and South America. So now I know why our math syllabus needs to be so challenging. But it still brings me back to the question of what should parents do if their child isn't the top in their class or goes for tuition? I'm meeting Dr. Yap Ban Ha. He is considered a maths mastery expert in Singapore and abroad. He believes that any tough question can be solved with the bar model method. And if learned correctly, it's, well, a piece of cake.
Hello,
Hi,
Dr. Yap.
hi,
Stephen.
hi.
Good to
Banha.
meet you. Wow,
Good to
I
meet
see
you.
you've got these cakes.
Yeah, a bit of a props.
Help me understand the math model method because, I've got 2 kids, but I still don't get it.
All right.
Why is it able to solve any mathematics problem?
I don't think it can solve any mathematics problem, but it can solve quite a lot of challenging mathematics problem.
All right, give me an example. How's it
So
work?
a common word problem that's considered challenging in primary school, say I got characters like spiky and curly.
Okay.
So perhaps spiky has 3 times as much money as curly. Say we do know that spiky gives curly $2.
Okay.
And as a result, they both have the same amount of money.
All right.
Can you imagine how Spiky's amount of money can be given to Curly such that they both have the same amount of money?
Yep.
And we do know that he gave her $2.
Okay.
That would mean the $2 would be this, isn't it?
Yep.
So
Yep.
I could ask any kind of questions. Example, how much money did Spiky have in the beginning? $2 for this.
Okay.
So that would be
$6.
$6. How much money did she have at first? Given that it's the same amount, she had $2. How much money did they both have in the end?
Okay.
So that's how bar model help students solve problems that are considered challenging at primary level.
So you've just shown me how the bar model method works, but does that also apply to the tough PSLE questions?
Let's take a look at some of those problems that you see in the social media.
Okay.
Like the semicircle problem.
Yeah?
All right, let's take a look at that. The students were given a bunch of identical semicircles arranged somewhat like that. And then they were told certain distances.
Yep.
I think they were told this is 12 centimeter, that's 12 centimeters. I think that's like 16 centimeters and these are 22 centimeters. So they were asked what's the diameter. If you want to use the bar model, I suppose you can. There are 3 of them together with the 12 and 12, 24. Below you have 2 of those and a bunch of distances, 22, 22 and 16. So if that's 60, that's 24. So that would be 36 centimeters.
So this model method is actually taught in schools. Does that mean parents can just keep drilling their kids on it, to prepare for the PSLE?
I think in maths, you don't really drill kids.
Right.
What is really important is actually the development of ability to visualize. So if parents really want to help their children do very well in mathematics, then they need to focus on visualization.
Then what about those questions that are not in the syllabus? So that's where there was a bit of unhappiness.
Of course, everything in the PSLE, because PSLE is designed around a syllabus, will never be out of syllabus. I think what you're talking about is the problems being unfamiliar.
Okay.
So sometimes parents are up in arms because they will say, but in all the practice papers they have done before, they have never encountered this. It's so unfair.
Okay.
For you to give them that unfamiliar problem during the exams. But that is by definition what a problem is. A problem always entails some degree of novelty. Otherwise we call that an exercise, isn't it?
Your results set. For those of you who didn't meet your expectations, it doesn't matter. PSLE is just a stepping stone. There's a long road ahead.
So, are our PSLE mathematics papers too difficult?
I guess it's all a matter of perspective and expectations. I, for one, am going to remind my kids that there'll always be tough challenges in life like tough exams, and it's okay to not get that perfect score.